Alright, so to pick up where we left off, we finished with phonemes and syllables, and now we're moving up to the bigger constituents, which are syntax and nouns, verbs, those sorts of things. So we're moving up to words and how words are understood at the sort of linguistic level. So then in the next section, we can talk about more psychology. So Chomsky, our big language is innate. It is species specific, meaning humans, and it's biologically pre-programmed. So you're born with it. You're born ready to learn it, is what I should say, is a better representation of his work. And we're born with grammar. So we natively understand the syntactic rules of language. And then we just sort of add the flavor on top, which is the words or those arbitrary symbols. Remember that language is a symbol system. Okay. So we talked about two pieces, and one is competence, which is our own knowledge of our own language, so how competent we are in the language, and performance, which is ability. So competence is sort of what he's arguing is innate. Performance, not so much. So performance is limited by cognitive capacity. So that's why you get some people are better at language than others, because he's arguing that it's still, I guess, a little innate in the sense that it's limited by IQ. And so our cognitive ability limits our performance ability. And he called this, the idea of this innate grammar, generative grammar. So it's a finite set of rules, so a limited set of rules that produce or generate all legal sentences. And it does not generate non-sentences. And there's some question about this particular thing, because as a grown adult, on purpose, I can generate non-sentences. But the idea is that we don't do that naturally. It's something that you learn. As well as you would say a lot of children's languages are non-sentences, but they actually follow very set of structured learning orders, and those sentences are legal. They're just not what you're used to. Like I go is technically a legal sentence because it's a noun and a verb. It's not the correct conjugation of the verb because conjugation is part of performance. And so generative grammar tends to explain sort of adult language best. So there are a lot of phrase structure rules. This is all under generative grammar. There are phrase structure rules that describe how words can be combined. So we know that there's a noun phrase and a verb phrase, and sometimes after the verb phrase there's direct objects, there can be clauses, that sort of thing. And sentences are created in this sort of hierarchical fashion with rewrite rules. Rewrite rules are how we can go from a question to a declarative statement, and how we can reorder words from active to passive voice and make it first person to third person, and tenses, we can change tenses. Okay. So what are all the different types of words that we can have? This down here is just sort of a joke, but I'm talking about like nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives. Back up. There are determinants, there are conjunctions, prepositions. So there's actually a lot of different types of words. Verbs. Did I say verbs? And this is really tiny, so you'll have to blow it up on your own screen. But there are lots of types of words. We've got nouns, with pronouns, proper nouns, common nouns. We've got how they break down to singular or plural. We've got adjectives, which can be gerunds or qualifiers. Verbs, which have a ton of different types of verbs. Adverbs. Prepositions, which can also be determiners, conjunctions. So there's a lot of word types to learn. And if this brings you back to high school English, I'm sorry. So we've got nouns. So nouns can act as names. They can be subjects or objects in a clause. So they can be doing the action or having the action done to them. And all things are nouns. So noun number one is this Bruce cat who's being a pain in the butt tonight. Okay. Adjectives are the way we describe nouns. So adjectives specifically modify nouns. So Bruce is a pain. Because that's modifying the noun Bruce. We've got verbs, so actions, events, states, and they have tenses. So is would be the verb in that sentence. Was and will continue to be, so the different tenses for verbs. Adverbs are words that modify verbs and not nouns. So adjectives for nouns, adverbs for verbs. I've got a good adverb for that one. So lots of different adverbs. So when you say something is going slowly, you are modifying go. Determiners are words that determine the number of nouns. So the, a, some, many, really. Right? So he is a lot of pain. Prepositions are words expressing relationship. So to, with, from, under, above, between. Conjunctions are things that connect sentences, so everybody can hear the conjunction junction song in their head. But and because. Pronouns are words that stand in the place of a noun, so she, he, it, them, they, and other types of noun, they're pronoun phrases. So numbers are sometimes considered pronouns. Because it's telling you how many, like it's kind of a determiner and a pronoun because it's filling the place of the noun. But most people consider those nouns. Kind of depends on how they're used. Oh, wrong way. All of those things together can be broken into content words. Content words are the ones that convey the meaning in a sentence. So this is what you need to understand what the sentence is trying to get across. Whereas function words are trying to do the work of the language. So many times conjunctions are function words, determiner and prepositions are function words, but nouns, adjectives, adverbs, verbs, and pronouns are the content words that you need to have to understand what's happening. Okay. Another thing we're going to talk about is sentence structure. So I'm going to have you diagram a sentence. And so we can label them in a bunch of ways. So here's just this example I found on the internet. So phrases, so you see how we're working up from words to bigger pieces here. So phrases are groups of words that form a grammatical unit. So phrases are parts of clauses, clauses are parts of sentences. So noun phrases are any grammatical phrase with a noun. Verb phrases are grammatical phrases based on a verb. Clauses are a group of related words containing a subject and a verb. And so this gets confusing, I personally think, because we tend to talk about, noun phrase and verb phrase, but there's also the way to think about it as subject and predicate. I don't really care if you get the distinction between those two because I think it's fairly minute unless you're going to be an English teacher. But clauses are groups of words that have a subject and a verb, whereas phrases tend to be noun phrase, verb phrase. Okay. So subject is the phrase that might be nouns and verbs that the sentence is about. Predicate is sort of the information about the subject, so it's a little bit of the direct object kind of idea. And this gets really complicated, but we're mostly going to do this form, noun phrase and verb phrases. Constituents, so this is great during political season. Constituents are the people in a congressperson's district, right? Well, constituents in sentences are linguistic units that are part of larger linguistics units. Generally, we think of this as words. So words are constituent of a phrase, a clause, and a sentence. Clauses and phrases are constituents of a sentence. Sentences are constituents of a paragraph. Paragraphs are constituents of discourse. So you can see it's getting bigger and bigger. But you can kind of think of constituents as words because that's the level we're going to focus on until we get to reading, and then we'll talk more about larger discourse. But objects are this is the direct and indirect objects. So you have noun phrase, verb phrase. This is what the verb phrase noun person is acting on. So if you have he kicked, kicked what? The ball, that would be an object. It's also still a noun phrase, but it's the thing that the subject verb is acting on. Now verbs are special because they come in lots of types. So transitive verbs take an object, like he kicked what? The ball. And some verbs require an object for you to understand. So he smelled. Generally, that either means they smell, they stink, so that could be an intransitive verb. It doesn't take an object. When you are using it more as an adjective, so you're actually modifying the noun, he smelled. But really what you're saying in that sentence is, I smelled him, it was bad. Okay. Transitive verbs require an object, so you can say, he smelled the flowers. Ditransitive verbs require both a direct and an indirect object. If you don't quite get these, what I tell you to do is just Google it, and there's tons of examples on words that are transitive versus intransitive, and nouns can be both. It depends on the sentence and the interpretation of the sentence. So modifiers are mostly adjectives, so it's a part of speech that's dependent on another. It sort of modifies, qualifies. So this is little clauses that are modifying the noun. So modifiers like the whole clause, but generally they're adjectives. So I could say the lisp be vampire. I guess that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But the vampire with a lisp. So with a lisp is a clause where we have determiners. We have a preposition, a determiner, single lisp, and an adjective. But that's modifying that noun. So these are kind of little, sorry, cat just clawed the other cat for fun. Stop being a bastard. Stop. Okay. So vampire with a lisp or the cat with an agenda is a modifier for that noun. Hopefully one of these videos we won't have any animal drama. I doubt it. So what we can do with all of that information is make ourselves a tree diagram. So tree diagrams are diagrams of the sentence structure that allow us to understand the underlying grammar. So we can break this into a subject and a predicate. So you see how that's a higher order than noun phrase, verb phrase. But in this subject we have noun phrases, so the destruction of the city was inevitable. So our noun phrase has an article or determiner and a noun, so single, the destruction. Our noun phrase also includes a prepositional phrase, modifier, so of the city, so preposition, determinant, noun. And then our verb phrase was, which is a regular verb, and then inevitable, which is an adjective modifying destruction. Right? So it doesn't modify city, it modifies destruction. So you can create these trees to understand all the different types of words in a sentence and their relationships to each other. So this prepositional phrase is modifying this noun, whereas this verb phrase and adjective are modifying the original noun. Okay. So if I break down these sentences, this sentence is boring. I have this sentence as my noun phrase. Is boring is my verb phrase. Technically, this is a complex verb, but this boring here is a sort of verb and an adjective modifying this noun here. This here is a determiner. Colored pencils were used by the teacher. Oh, passive voice. So passive voice is tricky sometimes. We got our noun phrase and our verb phrase and another noun phrase by the teacher. Colored pencils, again, adjective and noun. We've got our complex verb here, were used. By is a preposition, determiner, and a noun. This noun is not really modifying any of these nouns, but it's part of this passive voice. So it's really the teacher is using the colored pencils, but since we're doing this in passive voice, these nouns are modifying this noun. Right? So these are sort of indirect objects. So that leads us nicely into this discussion of active versus passive. So active, the subject of the sentence. The beginning of the sentence is the person or thing doing the action. Passive, the subject of the sentence is not doing the action. So colored pencils, we're not using the teacher, because that would be a weird cartoon. But the teacher is actually using the colored pencils. So most people suggest writing an active voice because it helps with understanding, because I don't have to go back and sort of rearrange my tree structure to understand this sentence. There are different ways to build sentences. So going back to Chomsky, these were some of Chomsky's original arguments on why human language had to be innate, is because we had these underlying rules. So this is part of generative grammar rules. So recursion allows us to create sentences that have embedded sentences. So I know that I know that I know that I know. So recursion allows us to create these sentences that kind of go back on each other. Iteration, I had ice cream and I ate ice cream and I love ice cream. And then transformations. So transformation is any grammatical rule where I go from one syntax structure to another. So active to passive, a regular sentence to a question, changing tense. So these sort of three rules really allow us to create sentences that no one has ever said or heard before. So creativity is a big part of Chomsky's grammar theory. And he said that's why we're different from animals, is because we have creativity. So for transformational grammar or generative grammar, they kind of have several different names, but we're going to kind of lump it all together. You have the semantic system, so it assigns those meanings to the syntactic string. So this is our meaning to symbol mappings. A phonological sentence, which is how we produce the sounds. And so sound to spelling rules. Now spelling and writing had nothing to do with Chomsky's theories because his argument was that the spoken language was innate, the written language was learned. Okay. And then we have the rules that go with them. So that's the syntax and grammar and those transformations. So we have a system that assigns meaning to the symbols. We have ways that those symbols are pronounced or spoken. And then we have the rules that relate those symbols to each other. Okay. So for Chomsky, deep structure was the meaning of the sentence. So it was that semantic and syntactic sentence piece. Now it seems to me like the meaning of a sentence would only be semantics until you remember that word order is so important in English. So I smacked the cat, can you continue with these ridiculous cat jokes, would be that I was doing the smacking. If I said Bruce smacked me, he was doing the hitting. So the order matters. So that's why syntax is important in deep structure. Surface structure is just the actual words, which is where the transformation and phonology comes in. And this really helps us understand our processing of ambiguous sentences. The surface structure is grammatically legal, but the deep structure is like, wait, what just happened? An ambiguous sentence, the most famous one is the horse raced past the barn, fell. And so if you ask people who's falling, you could have two options, the horse or the barn. Children usually say barn because it's the closest noun. Adults tend to sort of split evenly. It's actually the horse. If I said the horse that raced past the barn, adding that one simple word makes it unambiguous because you're adding, you're cueing an embedded clause. Fell, the horse that raced past the barn, fell. You go, oh, this poor horse, it fell over. But if you leave out that clause marker, it's still grammatically correct. So surface structure wise, it is right. But deep structure wise, you're like, why? What's happening? Ambiguous sentences are things also that the surface structure doesn't give you enough information. So I said, it smelled nice. You go, okay, that's a pronoun. Who smelled nice? What smelled nice? So there's not enough information to transform that into deep structure. Okay. So is innate Chomskyism sort of the only answer? And the answer is no. More to come. And we're really going to focus this semester on cognitive linguistics because that's what I do. But it's this idea, the counterpart to Chomsky is that language is just part of our general cognitive system. We have this brain, it does all this magic cognitive stuff. It has all these neurons that fire and do things. And part of the things that we do is language, and it's not specifically innate. It's just part of our general sort of information processing. So the way to make this more clear is to use a computer example. And so it's this idea that computers don't really care what software you install. Well, they pretend to do. But they don't care what software you install. It's all part of that general processor. And so the way, as long as it's all written in the same code language that it understands, it doesn't matter if you're installing Word or OpenOffice. It's still part of that general processing system. The innateism point of view would say it matters. Specific modules come with a computer, and that's the only thing it could possibly do. And so we'll explore this some more in one of the next big sections on how it's probably a little bit of both, but we're going to lean a little more towards cognitive linguistics to really explain a lot of the issues that we have with language, because those have a much better ways to explore dyslexia and Alzheimer's and some other interesting problems that people can have with words. So, is it all innate Chomsky? No. We're going to cover more things that aren't innate Chomsky in the next section.